millennia, humanity has grappled with the most profound question: why is there something rather than nothing? Where did it all begin? The scientific consensus, represented by the Big Bang Theory, tells us our universe had a beginning. But what caused that beginning? The atheist, in their pursuit of a universe without a creator, often offers an answer that, when critically examined, is fundamentally illogical. They posit what I call the virgin birth of the universe. My argument is that the attempt to maintain atheistic or agnostic positions, when confronted with the evidence of a cosmic beginning, commits the fallacy of special pleading. The implication of their stance is either that an infinite regress is possible, despite the logical impossibility of actual infinities within a physical space, or that the laws of causal physics simply and arbitrarily broke down at the one moment they cannot explain. The universe's beginning leads inevitably to a singularity, demanding a first cause. Rejecting this necessity forces one to embrace those two flawed concepts. As a theist, I'm able to accept all sound scientific findings, from cosmology to quantum mechanics, while maintaining philosophical coherence. I do not reject science. Rather, the atheist must reject this philosophical coherence, making their ultimate scientific understanding incomplete or invalid. I want to be clear from the outset: the debate over the Bible's historicity or validity is a secondary argument that depends on the successful conclusion of this primary argument. The necessity of God is a matter of logic and cosmology. The truth of any specific holy book is a subsequent question of evidence and history. This primary argument does not depend on the secondary argument. God, in this context, is presented not as a religious proposition, but as the philosophical necessity required to terminate the causal chain. This is about reason, not revelation quite yet. Let's start with what science tells us. The modern cosmological model, the Big Bang Theory, points to a definitive beginning. The observation of universal expansion, when mathematically reversed, leads us inevitably to a singularity, a point of infinite density in zero volume. The singularity represents the boundary condition of our universe. A boundary implies a beginning. Everything within our universe is contingent. It depends on something else for its existence, and it possesses characteristics that it could conceivably lack while still existing, demonstrating that its specific nature is not necessary. But what caused the boundary itself? Now, a sophisticated materialist will object here. They will state, quite correctly, that the singularity itself is a prediction of general relativity, and that general relativity breaks down to the Planck scale. They will argue that the true answer lies in a yet undiscovered theory of quantum gravity, or models like loop quantum cosmology, which potentially replace the singularity with a quantum bounce or cycle. But to rely on the hope that the laws of physics will somehow change arbitrarily at the Planck scale to solve the problem of beginning is merely substituting one faith position for another. This is effectively the science of the gaps fallacy, a belief that unknown physics will magically bridge the current logical inconsistency. Even if the singularity is replaced by a bounce, what is bouncing? What is the underlying reality? The space and time that is undergoing the process? A cyclic or oscillating universe model does not solve the problem of contingency. It merely pushes the problem of beginning into an infinite past. If the universe has been cycling infinitely, we are immediately back to the problem of infinite regress, which we will show is logically untenable. And what of the standard atheist counterargument? It is to invoke quantum fluctuations, the idea that the universe sprang into existence from a fluctuation in a pre-existing vacuum. But here's a critical flaw. Quantum fluctuations are not nothing. They are events within a pre-existing reality. They are contingent. A quantum fluctuation, by definition, requires space to fluctuate in and time to fluctuate over. To suggest the universe originated from a quantum fluctuation is to presuppose the very things you're trying to explain: time and space. Asking how a quantum fluctuation created the universe is like asking how a fish can swim without water. It fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism. Furthermore, we have absolutely no empirical evidence that actions at the smallest localized quantum scale could ever result in the wide-scale, universal, non-local creation event of the Big Bang. This leap from micro-event to macro-universe is an assumption, not a scientific conclusion. The quantum fluctuation argument simply pushes the problem of contingency back a step. Let's consider another crucial aspect. Prior to the Big Bang, the reality from which our universe emerged would have been in a state of high stability. So the question becomes, why did this stable reality suddenly kickstart itself into rapid expansion? Stable systems do not spontaneously destabilize and expand without an external impetus. To argue that the Big Bang was a genuinely uncaused arbitrary event is to argue that something happened for absolutely no reason at all. This brings us to the most fundamental challenge, the breakdown of causal physics. The principle of causality, that every event has a cause, is the bedrock of all empirical science. If the universe's starting point was a genuinely uncaused event, then causal physics must have been broken or overturned precisely at that moment. But here's the fatal question. If causal physics has the capacity to break down, what exactly causes it to break down? And what is stopping it from breaking down in this very moment? You cannot arbitrarily posit an exception without a cause for the exception itself. If it has no cause, the special pleading begins. The inconsistency becomes glaring here. The atheist demands rigorous empirical proof for God's existence, a proof that must adhere to the very principles of causality and observation. Yet, to explain the ultimate beginning, they are forced to disregard or suspend these same principles. You cannot arbitrarily toss out the rule of causality, a fundamental principle rule of science, to explain the Big Bang, while still demanding empirical proof, which depends entirely on cause and effect observation. For God, this is a fatal double standard. So, if the universe couldn't just kickstart itself, what other options does atheism present? One alternative is the concept of an infinite regress, an endless chain of contingent causes, stretching back forever. This is a logical impossibility. No amount of rhetoric can justify an infinite regress in actual existence. For any event in the chain to occur, all prior events must have already occurred. If the chain is truly infinite, with no ultimate beginning, then no event could ever actually begin, and the entire series could never be actualized. If the cause of the present moment has always been deferred to the previous link, and that link to the one before it, and so on, endlessly, then the present moment, the universe we inhabit, could never have actually come to exist. A series that has no beginning can have no end. Since an infinite regress is impossible, and the universe cannot cause itself, logic demands a different solution, a non-contingent, uncaused first cause that lies outside of the chain of space and time it initiated. Now, a critic might interject here and claim, you are special pleading. If everything needs a cause, then God needs a cause. And a more common, sophisticated atheist defense is to argue causality is a concept that only applies within the universe. The universe itself is exempt. Let's address both powerful objections. First, addressing the claim that causality is irrelevant at the boundary. This is precisely the special pleading being called out. If you observe that causality is a fundamental principle governing all phenomena you have ever observed, from physics to biology, then declare that the one event you cannot explain, the start of the universe, to be the one exception to that universal rule, is an arbitrary and unjustified assertion. It is to arbitrarily dismiss the best evidence we have for how reality operates in order to avoid a conclusion you dislike. Second, addressing the claim that God needs a cause. This objection fundamentally misses a critical category distinction. The universe, being comprised of space, time, and matter, is a physical contingent entity. It had a beginning in time. It changes, and the evidence of its beginning forces us to ask, what caused this physical thing to begin? Everything physical and contingent requires an external cause. However, the first cause, which we call God, is posited as a necessary, non-physical, abstract entity. Think of abstract concepts like the laws of logic or the necessity of mathematics. These things are real, but they do not begin or end in the same way physical objects does. They simply are. They are not contingent on anything else for their existence. Therefore, to say that the universe, a contingent physical thing, is uncaused is special pleading because it arbitrarily violates the law of causality. Or to say that God, a necessary metaphysical thing, is uncaused is not special pleading. It is a philosophical necessity. It is to place the first cause into the only logical category capable of being the starting point, a category that, by its very nature, does not require a cause. This first cause must be fundamentally different from everything it caused. It must be simple, stable, and necessary. Its existence cannot be contingent on anything else. It simply is. This is why God is a philosophical necessity. It is the name we give to this non-contingent terminus of the causal chain. Rejecting this philosophical necessity means rejecting logic itself and embracing the arbitrary. We've traveled through cosmology, quantum mechanics, and philosophy, and what we find is that atheism, in its attempt to account for the universe without a cause, is forced down one of two logically untenable paths: the infinite regress or the arbitrary breakdown of causality. Atheism is very much not a scientific stance, since it must reject the foundational principle of causality to support its claim. To act as if you are a man of science and then call yourself an atheist is genuinely laughable. To be a scientist and call yourself an atheist is absurd, because according to your own position, that same science can be arbitrarily removed whenever it is most convenient. The evidence from the Big Bang points away from an arbitrary, uncaused start and irresistibly towards a logical, necessary, and powerful first cause. The theistic position accepts the reality demonstrated by science, but also accepts the logical necessity of a boundary condition, thereby maintaining full philosophical coherence. Crucially, remember that the hierarchy of these claims, the debate over the Bible's historicity or validity, is a secondary argument. It logically depends on the prior success of this primary argument, establishing the necessity of a first cause. Conversely, this primary argument, the cause for a necessary creator, is completely independent of the Bible's claims. You cannot refute the necessity of a cause by citing issues with a book about the cause. To demand rigorous empirical proof and causal explanations for everything within the universe, but then to abandon those very demands for the universe's ultimate beginning, is the definition of special pleading. What makes more sense? A universe that spontaneously creates itself from nothing in violation of all scientific and logical principles, or a universe created by a non-contingent, uncaused cause that is logically necessary for existence itself? The choice, I believe, is clear. I hope Forrest Valkai get well soon from his intellectual arrogance, but I doubt that will happen. God bless anyone who viewed this video, including you, Forrest.